Go for liftoff in T-minus 30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.
Well, hey, thanks for stopping by on a Saturday afternoon. Today was supposed to be the third part in my series on how we define good cop, and we might get to that later today or this evening, but I've been blessed to have Monica Perez from Deep Dives with Monica come on. I was introduced to her by Buck Johnson from Counterflow a few weeks ago and immediately fell in love with her content. It was, I must really appreciate her coming on because I'm actually wearing a button down. Normally it's just my t-shirt. Buck got a t-shirt. So Monica's getting the button down. So yeah, anyway, you guys know how to order coffee. This is the best coffee in the world. And yeah, I'm not just saying that because I sell it. Merchandise, coffee, mugs, tumblers, all of that. If you haven't checked out Monica's content and you want to know what a radical libertarian thinks like, you need to go and listen to her because she is not afraid to say things that might get us taken down on YouTube. So far, that's only happened with one guest on Monday Night Musings, and so here on the Libertarian Low Down series, we might see what we can do. They didn't take Spike down, they didn't take Matt Wright down, they didn't take Bearded Truth down. So we'll see if we can get Monica through this. So Monica, as I bring you in, we don't talk about the virus by name. We call it the coof, and we refer to the jab as the jab. So without any further ado, Monica, thank you so much for doing this. I'm super excited to have you on. Like I said, when I saw or heard you on Buck's show, I was like, this gal is on fire. Can I call is that?
Oh yeah, I have absolutely. It's
Does
very
that
hard
violate
to
something
offend
from
me.
DEI?
No, it might actually. Even
Okay.
guys offends something from DEI. But I am kind of toxic, and I hope you have some extra strikes because I will say you'll probably get a strike on YouTube just for my name.
Just for your
Isn't that messed
Yeah,
up?
but your channel's not down, so you can't
No,
be
but
that
I get
toxic.
super striked all the time. I hardly ever publish on it. I pulled almost all of my content off of there. I am always just skirting the edge of getting completely taken down because the reason is that last year I did a series. It was like every single Saturday. I did 35 shows with the guy who was leading the charge in Georgia. I mean, I don't want to get you taken down.
About that thing
yes,
that happened a couple of years
the
ago
thing
that might have been in
yes,
November.
right. And that just kept going. And boy, just one day I woke up and it was just like strike, strike, strike. And I was, as fast as the strikes were coming up, I was going and just erasing it all because I'd already made it private. They were private videos, private. And I was getting strikes for them. And I just woke up one day and I didn't even have time to back it up. I just erased like 35 videos. So.
Oh yeah. Like the video that from my Monday Night Musings. So I have another series, TC and Friends Monday Night Musings, which we might have to have you back on for one of those sometime. Sure. But I wanted to get this Libertarian Lowdown thing done because there aren't a lot of strong libertarian voices that happen to also be women out there.
That is true. I don't know if it's biological or what, but yeah, it's rare.
So I wanted to get you on here, but the video that got me my first warning strike and then got deleted immediately was about that topic that might center around integrity. And it was a local guy who wrote a book about that issue here as it pertains to Minnesota, and it made it 5 days and they took it down.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So it was probably the content and not just the person. I mean, I had one video two videos got taken down before they were fully uploaded. So
Holy smokes, you
yeah.
are
But
kind of a
that wasn't me though. That was the guests I had on who talked about
that stuff.
medical things.
I like your Japanese cherry blossoms
Isn't
behind
it?
you.
I feel like it's upward, like it moves up and it's
It
light in
lengthens your room.
color.
Yeah.
It just there's something really positive I find about it. And so it's a real keeper.
A local guy keeps telling me, he goes, "We need to build you a studio," and I'm like, one, that takes money. Two, like, what's wrong with what?
It looks fine. Your scene looks fine. My scene usually has laundry hanging in the background. So, although I do have a nice poster of Triple G Gennady Golovkin, who's my favorite boxer. But over there it gets messy.
So how in the world? I mean, I know you had a radio. You like did actual radio at one time.
Yeah.
But how in the world did you end up like in this realm of dangerous thought? Because
yeah, I didn't mean to, and I'll tell you quickly. I've done my origin story many times. I've told people in great detail. I won't, but I'll give you just the absolute bullet highlights, which I've never done before. Is I was raised a libertarian by my father, and so I had all the stuff implanted of how to value things. We used to watch Milton Friedman every Sunday on Free to Choose on PBS, and there was just very
he
straight up.
wouldn't get on there ever again.
He would no, I agree with that. And actually, I think that because he was a monetarist, like he's not my thing anymore anyway. Even Ayn Rand, I don't like anymore. But that was, I mean, I read Atlas Shrugged once before I got out of high school, and for sure twice not long after that. I have a first edition of all of Atlas Shrugged, Fountainhead, and We the Living. So
wow.
So I was raised like that. And then I was a banker, ended up being a banker. I have a very long story, but I was a banker. And when I had kids, I thought, well, I'm never going to be an investment banker again, but maybe I could be like a money manager or something like that, 9 to 5. So I thought I'd make my child rearing years useful. And I got a chartered financial analyst credential, which is like 3 years of studying. And it's a really hard test. So you study a lot. And I realized then, which I never knew before, that intensive intellectual activity kind of breeds itself. So as I was procrastinating from like really intensive intellectual activity, I started noticing things that I never noticed before, like Democrats are not like all bad and stupid, and Republicans aren't all bad and stupid. Like I tried to see if are all Democrats bad drivers? Like why is it that it seems to me that Democrats just don't get it? And I realized when I was doing this that like Democrats are looking at you and they're seeing your politicians behind you, and you're looking at Democrat. I mean, I'm not a Republican. I never was. I was always libertarian. Only ever voted for Ron Paul, pretty much. And Harry Brown, my mom. I voted for my mom, was the Right to Life candidate one year. So, I mean, like in our city council, she got like 30 votes. But anyway, so when I looked at that, so then I realized that they look at Republicans and they just see the Republican things behind you, and nobody ever looks over their shoulders and realizes that. So then I realized like the whole system was a scam. And somehow I stumbled into, I mean, I know how, but it's a long story again, Hans Hermann Hoppe and Murray Rothbard. And I realized that government self-limiting government was impossible, but also that self-ordering society was like a natural thing. Right. So my mind was on fire with this, and I happened to be at a wedding with somebody who was a radio producer at the station near, in Atlanta, which was one of the biggest. It was the number one news talk in the country at the time, whatever defines that category. But she just fell in love with my ideas, and it was just Hans Hermann Hoppe. It wasn't really my ideas, but she just was so sick of the system. She was a hardcore libertarian. She was just so tired. She worked on conservative radio. I guess she liked her boss, but the whole atmosphere was just too one-sided for her. And she introduced me to her boss, and immediately he gave me an on-air audition, and then I was just on the air every Saturday for 8.5 years after that. I had never
went having no radio experience.
Correct.
To
never
an
did a
on-air
podcast in my life.
edition.
Right. Yes. He had
Talk
me
about
just go to the
trial by
station.
fire.
Yeah, he had me go to the station and sit in and, like, speak into the mic of the guy who was doing a live show so that he could hear, because women's voices, he didn't say this, but I know women's voices are high, shrill, and it does not make for good radio a lot of times. Like, that could be why they're underrepresented on the radio.
Well,
And
no,
then
that
yeah.
and the ones that have the voices that you want to listen to are always on late at night.
Yeah, and they overdo
Mhm.
it. Like, he was
Yeah.
like, "Don't do that."
Yeah.
And he gave me that opportunity, and then, like, the first night, he just said, and I actually knew what this experience was like because I had it. He showed me the board, whatever. Not that I was the board up, but, like, I had some buttons I had to push. It was a call-in show. And he said, and, like, had knobs and everything, and he said, like, it's like riding a motorcycle, like, you have to look at your knobs, you have to keep your hands on the, the throttle and the brake and everything, but really you just have to make sure that you stay upright and move forward. And I was like, "Okay." And I was and
No problem.
the experience was so similar to my first experience on a motorcycle. My father taught me how to ride a motorcycle in one day. So he gives me figure eights in the parking lot. Then he takes me on the highway with him on the back. Okay, so I was like sick. I wouldn't allow myself to shake. Like, there's amazing at a certain point. A few times this has happened to me where you can actually have mind over matter when it comes to, like, shaking and the physiological response to stress. So I knew that if I really gave into, like, shaking, I would crash and kill us both. So I was like, "Hey, I think I'm finished. Can we just Paul was like, "Oh yeah, downshift," and whatever. I was like, "Okay." So I got off and I was just like, so it
Which
was like,
sounds like it's kind of a metaphor for your entire life.
it's yeah, it certainly was for my radio thing. Like, that day, it was exactly like that. I did like a 2 or 3 hour show, and I mean, shaking on the inside, but no one ever heard it. And I was really sick with stage fright till my last show, 8.5
And
years.
8.5 years, and you were
The live
sick
show
with.
just I wasn't shaking like that, but I would be like physically ill until the show started. Not till the show was over, but, like, in anticipation of going live,
Yeah.
because it was a lot. I mean, it wasn't like prime time on 6 o'clock on drive time, but it was like 40,000 people, I think, probably. And maybe less, but not a lot less. And I had done it where I'd fill in during the week and it would be like that. And it
You were the
didn't bother
go-to
me.
fill-in, weren't you?
For a while I was. And when that gal who had discovered me moved, what I didn't realize is she used to, like, just always go into the program director and just be like, "Hey, if you have a fill in, like, you know, don't forget about Monica. Don't forget about Monica." And he would always fill in. And then I wasn't aggressive like that because it made me nervous. Like, it made me nervous. So I kind of kept my head down. And she's like, "You're never going to get anywhere if you don't tell them that you're available." So I did do the fill, like I did Eric Erickson and some really big fill-ins, which one time I think I actually changed legislation because I happened to get that show that night and I had a local lawyer activist talk about the no knock raid legislation that was in the legislature like that day. Like, it was going to get, I think, voted on that Monday, and this was a Thursday. And we just had people call and it got defeated shockingly. And I was like, wow, the power of that. And that's why I think I ended up getting kind of frog marched out of there, because my program director taught me everything I loved. And even his successor was awesome, but it came under new management. And then this was in February 2020 and the CDC is in Atlanta. And I was like, oh, hey, the CDC was sitting at a meeting with the CDC of China and they were planning this COVID thing. And it's not going to be 2 weeks. It's going to be 2 years. And I did not last long after that. I had to go.
Yeah.
I don't know. They didn't tell me
Ratings
why.
ratings might have gone up, but
Yes, they didn't tell me
the
why. But
broadcasting might go down.
I also had an executive producer who was just like, "You should let your hair down." I was already starting to do podcasting, and he liked my podcast, and I was like, "I'm not going on the air. 9/11 was an inside job, and the only rule about this show is don't." My boss would tell me, just as long as no one goes running and screaming. And I said that people are going to go running and screaming, and he was like, "No, it's awesome." So my last show, literally, I think I hit like 9/11, OKC, Jeffrey Epstein. I think I used to always cover election integrity, so they could have guessed that was coming. Stacey Abrams was somebody I had exposed as a created person, and then the COVID thing. It was just, and then actually, yeah.
So you brought up created person, which is a very interesting topic because I have never used that phrase, but And a lot of the stuff that I talk about, even with on my platform, this is my platform. What am I doing? On my shows is people who have apparently just come out of nowhere in some respects and seem to like, how did this person get here?
Yeah.
Like, and we have that in Minnesota, like Ilhan Omar. Like,
Oh, well.
where did you come from, Ilhan? I mean, we know where you came from, but
Right.
like, how did you get this seat? Keith Ellison? Seriously? Like, how,
Well, I had someone was telling me about how I've told this before too, but he was from Cape Verde Islands, and I also knew a cop from Brockton, Massachusetts, and they both had the same story, which is they literally choose places to have migration that's like not organic. So like Mexico would be a great place for Texas and California. Puerto Rico was always a place for New York and Florida. China went to California, and there was always some kind of the Norse people went to the north, but they went out of their way to kind of like mix cultures by getting like Somalians to go to Minneapolis or something, and people from Cape Verde to go to Brockton, Massachusetts, and they literally have a human rights industry which is kind of off the grid. It's not transparent, it's not really accountable, but it's funded by the government, and they put billboards up in Cape Verde like, move to Brockton, we'll help. We'll give you $10,000 to move to Brockton, that kind of thing. So that's where our community comes from.
Yeah, I've never been able to figure out how Minnesota ended up with the largest Somali community in the United States.
I would bet anything. I would absolutely make a big bet that it was a concerted effort. Some NGO was tasked with getting people to migrate from Somalia to Minneapolis. Because it would be the most disruptive thing you could do culturally to both parties.
Well, it keeps everybody off kilter. It's very much an Alinsky tactic to keep your opponent off their game. And when they get used to dealing with one aspect of your attack, then you switch tactics while they're still dealing with the attack. So now they have to abandon the fight on that end to go over here and fight this on this front. And of course, the right, whether it's the libertarian right or the conservative right or whatever, has been predominantly horrible about staying on task. They just no good at staying on task at all. They fall for the feint every time.
Well, I think Ron Paul was getting everybody focused on the one thing that could bring everyone together. I gave a little talk recently, and I really dropped the ball. Somebody asked me how to reach conservatives as a libertarian, and I knew the answer, and I hate it when I miss something, but I learned it when I was on the radio because it was a conservative station. If you get people, everyone agrees. You could probably even get liberals to agree to the Bill of Rights. I mean, they don't like the Second Amendment, but basically the Bill of Rights is something that we could all use as a rallying cry. And I think Ron Paul, whether he knew that or he did it intentionally or what, he absolutely got people to tap into what is really the American archetypal, the foundational thing. When I was on the radio and I would talk libertarian talk, it was amazing how many people responded to it. And I just couldn't understand why the other hosts weren't doing it. It's because the other hosts were Republicans. They didn't want to do it. And now, but actual rank and file like that a lot. And I blame Trump and I would say this while he was running and people would like him. And I would say, look, the guy doesn't care about the Bill of Rights. And that is a problem for all of us. And I would get smacked down left and right. Well, you can't have everything. I was like, I don't want everything. I just want the
Bill of Rights. Yeah,
I don't want everything. I
want the Bill of Rights. I get in trouble for it too, though, yeah. Monica, honestly, because I'm literally kind of live in the heart, not in the heart of Minnesota, but kind of operate in the heart of the part of Minnesota that's very much MAGA, right? And I'm constantly reminding people, like, here's a guy who you voted for because you said he's a outsider, he's not part of the system, and I'm like, you're all, and I'm anti-mandatory jab, but this is the guy who you said is all for you, who gave us Operation Warp Speed to get the jab across the country as fast as possible through the hands of the military, which let's not even touch that. But he's also the guy who said take the guns first, worry about due process later.
I
And
know.
I've got conservative, Second Amendment loving, Bill of Rights loving people saying to me, well, but that's not what he meant. I'm like, there's no other way
Right.
to understand what he said than to hear what he said as take the guns first and then worry about due process later.
I mean,
How
that is
else
what
do
they're
you
doing.
how else do you worry? Like, how else do you take that?
That's what red flags are. That's what Lindsey Graham. It's the what I call the everything but laws. The Republicans are using the gun grabbing rhetoric to put in place many, many other restrictions and limitations, not just on gun rights, but on our freedom generally, on mostly information gathering. So they're saying, like, we will defend your gun rights, but in the meanwhile, you have to give up all your other rights. Then once the other rights are gone, then they can take the guns if they want them. They might not even need them at that point. Because if you ever even thought about revolting, they would be at your house in 15 seconds, unlike the Vegas shooting thing where they were just standing around like, gee, what's going on? You know, they try pulling that fast one.
You're not implying, Monica, that they are selectively not responding properly to certain situations that might involve firearms and the shooting of innocent people?
That would be the
You're not saying.
That would be
You're
the
not.
most generous interpretation I could put on that. They have to make sure those things happen before they can let them happen.
Well, so here's, since you're out there.
I'm on the fringes for sure.
You're on the fringes. No, I love it. Because
someone has to be.
I've been that way here in Minnesota. I mean, my platform's not huge, but I'm kind of the one who says things that, you're rocking the boat. And
I used to get pressure like that on the radio from people who loved me. Like, the people are going to say you're crazy. I'm like, well, but I think it's true. And I can't say anything. I don't have anything else. I got nothing else. My whole show is about how true, about the Boston Marathon bombing. Like, what do you want me to do? It just happened. I got to tell them what I know.
Well,
So,
yeah.
People don't want you to do it because sometimes it's because they love you.
See, I've heard you allude to that before, that people are more interested sometimes in protecting even though they might agree with you, they like you enough that they don't want to see something bad happen to you, whether it's, deplatformed or canceled or doxxed or whatever.
Spontaneous combustion. I'm just afraid, people just disappear or fall out windows and stuff. I don't have any firsthand information. I think you have to be highly influential or privy to private information for that to happen to you. I'm not afraid of that, but
you and I don't have to worry about getting Clinton because we're not connected to them, but they'll find ways. Yeah. But see, you and there's only one other person that's ever been able to throw me off, and you just did it.
Oh, sorry, but you were saying that you're the guy who goes out on the fringes.
Yeah, I'll go out on those fringes and I'll talk about those things, and when I mentioned like Uvalde, and I know you've talked about that, I think
a little bit.
maybe a little bit. You look at Uvalde. I'm not denying that Uvalde happened. See, that's the thing. I don't look at a place like Sandy Hook. I don't look at a place like Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. I don't look at Buffalo, at what is it, Tops Market or whatnot. Are you taking notes? You're taking notes, aren't you?
I do write little things down so we can touch on them later.
Get back to them. Yeah, that's you being a professional. I am not. I don't look at these things and deny that they happen. I tell people all the time, look, I believe people die in these situations. I just don't believe they die at the hands of the person that you believe they died at the hands of. Even if that person did the shooting or whatever the case might be, they were a pawn too. They were a bit of a patsy, if you will. And I do not put it past the autocrats and the oligarchs of the state to be willing to murder American people for an agenda. People get upset with me for saying that, but I do believe they're willing to murder American citizens.
Well,
because they don't see us anything
Vietnam
more
draft
than
is that
right. They don't see us as anything more than a for lack of better terminology, a food source. We're cattle to them, and so they will use us however they can to further their agenda.
I mean, we have proof of that because the elite have always conscripted people.
Right.
You know, I
Absolutely.
mean, in our lifetime. So maybe not yours, but mine.
Uh, no, I appreciate that. I'm older than you.
Oh, great. As the youngest of 9, I enjoyed that status. I took it for granted, but now I'm not. I'm not the youngest anymore. Well, I am the youngest of 9, but I'm not the
I
youngest
call
of the podcasters.
I'll call people kid now, and they're like, "You can't call me kid. I'm older than you." I was,
Oh my
and I'm
gosh.
like, "I'm gonna be 52."
Oh my
So
gosh. Well, I call people sweetie, and my kids like, don't, you're totally diminishing,
their
her or whatever.
personhood.
I'm like, I'm trying to be nice because there isn't enough love in this world.
I say dear
But
and sweetheart to women now, and then I
yeah.
immediately apologize, and because
Oh,
you
I
never
say it
know
to
how.
men and women. As
Yeah.
long as they're dear and sweet, why not?
Well, it just
So
feels weird, one guy to another going, "Oh,
yeah.
sweetheart."
Well,
That just,
right. You can't
well,
do that.
I'm not.
I was
I'm
at
not that though. I'm not woke.
I was at Whole Foods recently, and there was a woman who had pink bows in her hair. Like she had 2 pigtails and pink bows. I call people sweetie all the time, all the time. Um, is that what I call sweetie? I get it from my mother. All right, honey. Something like that. I don't know. Whatever it is. My mother says it, and I now say it. And this woman got, did you just call me sweetheart? And I said, yeah. I said I was, it's a term of endearment. I thought we were being friendly to each other. I'm a full grown woman with my own agency or whatever. She was like, I'm 50 something years old. And I was like, okay, but you're wearing pigtails and pink bows in your hair. So I think you're setting me up. You know? So you're not a sweetheart. I got
No,
you.
no, I take that back. You're right. I will never call
Exactly.
you sweetheart again,
I stand corrected,
lady.
bitch.
Oh, so you transitioned from live radio to, shall we
Yeah.
say, a heavily followed but definitely far more fringe
Yeah.
platform, which is, for podcasting in and of itself isn't fringe. In fact, if you look at podcasting in general, it is predominantly woke. There's a
Yeah.
lot of wokeness in podcasting. And part of that's because anybody that's not woke, maybe the more awakened types, will get, pushed down in the algorithms. They'll get deplatformed. They'll get silenced. Chased out of, you know, doxed. They love to dox anybody who's awakened, who's not towing the line on the narrative. But you kind of went out and took your base of your live audience and expanded that and partnered with someone else, because Deep Dives with Monica isn't new, but it's a new solo show for you.
Yes. So when I was on the radio, it was in Atlanta, and um I had Brad Binkley was my sidekick, really. And yeah,
Does Brad know that?
that's what he writes on his
Oh,
bio.
all right.
So then when we did the podcast, I was worried because the station was getting bought by somebody else, and I was a little worried. So I said, you know what? Not only are we not getting a daily show anytime soon, uh, I'm not even sure this is going to last. But it was the Monica Perez show, so it definitely was. It's not an insult to say it was my sidekick. So
I could think of more insulting things to say.
yeah, but then we were equal partners on the propaganda report and the drive time news class, because I said, like, they trained me to do a daily show. I know how to do it. And there isn't one really that hits the headlines so that you don't actually have to listen to the radio. Because I really hated listening to the radio because I wanted the information, but I just was so sick of all the time wasted on the politics. And I didn't agree with the politics, left or right. So to me, it was a real waste. Like I used to say about Rush Limbaugh, like he was the best, the absolute best. He's like Nirvana. He created the genre and he was the best at it, which isn't always the case. But he created it and he was the best at it. And I used to say, like, half the time I disagree with him, and the other half the time he's lying. So,
So it's
because
not
half
that you
the time,
disagree with him; you just know he's lying.
well, no, half the time it was like conservative stuff, neoconservative stuff, kind of military stuff, which I disagreed with. And the
Yeah.
other half the time he would say libertarian stuff or truthy stuff, but I think he was lying. I think he was just saying that to appeal to
He
what
was
was
he
the
was he was Rush was very good at sucking in the more conservative side of libertarianism.
he was great. I mean, he was absolutely great, but I wasn't getting closer to the truth with him. I was probably getting a little further from the truth because he
Well,
was
you were
taking, so
he's
I
an
wanted to toot
echo
myself.
chamber for a lot of people.
Yes.
Rush was just a loud voice saying what a lot of neocons and I call them normie. I have
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have a friend who loves it. He goes, "You call them normie cons."
Yeah.
That's what they are. They normie cons.
Yeah.
But
That's
he
exactly what it was. So, but I just felt like somebody, there was a place for that same thing, but a little more newsy and more from a libertarian perspective. So we did that, but it was every day. It was an hour a day, every single day of content, which takes many hours to put together. And if you don't spend many hours putting it together, you really aren't coming up with any original insights. And we were doing like 10 stories a day. And
Mhm.
I because of my, I still have 3 kids at home and like a super aging mom, I just couldn't do it anymore. And I really kept it going during lockdown because we all needed each other then. We
Oh
really
yeah.
needed each other. And we did a lot of live stuff. We did cocktail parties. I mean, I would get emails all the time that we were keeping people like that, like you're the only people in my life who are sane. Like if I didn't have this connection, I wouldn't know anyone who saw this for bullshit. Like it
They-
feels completely like everyone's been sucked into being a pod person or whatever. So that, and
it's like
then,
fishing.
yeah,
It's literally like fishing. You throw bait in the water. You catch the fish. You yank the fish out of its environment, even if it's only for long enough to take a picture with it. And the fish is over here going, "I'm suffocating." And that's exactly what they did to us during the coof
yes,
stuff.
yes,
Was they isolated us and made us feel like we were suffocating. And when you found a voice that was saying what was on your mind, you immediately said, "Okay, I'm not insane."
right.
And then then sometimes you look at the person who was saying it and go, "Okay, maybe I am insane because this person looks crazy too." But I got that a lot in my former career. I was warning people for years in my
Oh, I want to
former
hear about
career
this.
that, like, here's what's going to happen. This stuff is coming. I'm like, as much as I didn't really care for the totality of the Atlas Shrugged movies, and clearly,
Yeah.
if you watched all three parts of the Atlas Shrugged movies, you
Yeah.
could tell that the actors didn't care for it either because
They didn't, I don't think they had the time or the money to do it right.
yeah,
There was some deadline,
there was no way. But I mean,
there
I
was a
told people,
deadline that if they didn't make the movie within a certain amount of time, the rights would expire. And that's why they rushed it.
I didn't know that. But even as bad as the movies were compared to this magnus opus that was Anne's work, some people would argue Fountainhead, but
I thought Atlas Shrugged. I don't even think you need to read both of them.
no, I don't. Yeah, I would agree with that. But if you want to be an expert on Anne, I told people, go on Prime and watch this. And I'm telling you, and people would start to watch it and they go, "Okay, this is never going to happen. This kind of stuff isn't going to happen. They're not going to do that." And I said, "Okay, now here's what's going to happen." So in March at the end of February, beginning of March 2020, I was telling people that I worked with, I'm like, "Here's what's going to happen. Minnesota's going to follow California and New York. We're going to do this, 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 and this. And then by this amount of time, they're going to put mask dates in place. And then they're going to, they're going to lock us down and they're going to tell us who's essential and who's not. They're going to try and have people have papers to travel. And then they're going to force the jab on us." And they're like, "What are you talking about? Like, there's not even a jab for this particular virus." And I'm like, "There will be in a very short period of time. And then they're going to make you take it. And they're going to tell you where you can go. And they're going to tell you." And I said, they're going to shut down businesses and they're going to lock people up for not complying, and they're going to threaten business owners, and they're going to give passes to certain types of businesses, and people are like, "Okay, whatever." And I got about 6 to 8 months into the pandemic and people were like, "How did you know?" I said, "Because I pay attention." And people people are they like conservatives especially. They love the reactionary stuff. They'll cling to Fox News. They will cling to Fox News. They'll cling to any other alleged conservative media, but they'll always be on the cusp of following along with the rest of culture and society.
Isn't that the
Just
Overton window, basically? Like the body of acceptable range of opinions?
well,
So they
yeah,
have to
I wouldn't disagree with
say.
that assessment. I think that sometimes the Overton window I I don't think the Overton window shifts as much as some people would like to say it does. I think the Overton window is pretty pretty main pretty much center line, pretty centrist in my view. It shifts a little bit to the left, it shifts a little bit to the right, but it doesn't take a lot for a alleged conservative to fall outside of the parameters of the Overton window and be a far right person. And it doesn't take a lot for a progressive to fall into the far left perspective of the Overton window, because I think the center, which are the malleable sheep in the United States, especially, and but there again, as you've talked about it around the world, um, you've talked about it a lot in some of your with a lot of your content. Um, the the people are malleable, and so they always stay right in the center. There isn't a massive amount of people on the left or on the right in the United States. They're just right in the center, and they just want to keep living this life of comfort and ease. And anything that comes in that might challenge that comfort and ease, they'll back away from it. And so when they brought the coof up to us and presented it as this very dangerous thing, everybody's like, I don't really think it's dangerous, but I don't want to run afoul of the narrative. I want to be safe. I want to keep my job. I want to I want to be a good American. I want to, especially Christians. Oh, I want to love my neighbor. I heard that a lot. Every
So what does
church
that
has
mean?
said
You're
that.
supposed to take the thing because that's the polite thing to do?
Monica, I know, I'm on the opposite. I'm Reformed. I know you're Roman Catholic, so like we're not even supposed to get along. I'm surprised the stream hasn't caught on fire yet. Um, so I'm kind of a Calvinistic Reformed type. I know of a Presbyterian church that kicked a woman out for the
Re-
sin of murder. They disciplined her out of the church for the sin of murder for
Wow.
not wearing a mask.
You know, I did hear in my own house, somebody kind of made a reference like that. I was like, what? Whereas me, so I'm in a mixed vax family. And some of us were going to church and we got a new priest. And the first thing he said was, I know, so he was wearing a mask while he was talking to us. He's like, I know some people think that God will protect them, so they don't need to get the thing. Um, and then I like as soon as he said that, I don't even know what he said after that because that's the people in my house who are didn't get the thing. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that word,
It's
but you can bleep
as
it.
long as we don't keep saying it over and
No,
over.
definitely not. So
Yeah.
anyway, but those of us who didn't get the thing, we didn't do it because we thought it worked and God would protect us or whatever. It was just like, I don't know what this thing is, and I'm not worried about any of it. So I'm not doing it. And we, all three of us who are of different political bents generally, but we just looked at each other and we're like, never again. And that's as a church, like right down the street from my house. And we were going there and we just turned around and stopped going because that guy said
Didn't you
that.
end up finding another Catholic church where the
Yes.
priest is like anti-woke
Oh
and
my gosh, the most based Cuban priest ever, and, like, to the point where, like, the
but there
guest
again, look
priest.
where he's from.
Yeah, right, totally.
I
No, it's
mean,
awesome. Oh my gosh, like, brings tears to your eyes, and then he gets the guest priest that comes down. Literally, I can't believe it. I almost thought he was joking. He started talking about the New World Order and stuff, and he was like, "Oh, you think this is just bad policy? This is the devil." I was like, "Wow." We're looking at each other like, he might be going too far for me." But yeah, but
you know
I
what?
mean, I don't think he's wrong. I just get a little nervous when people say buzzwords. I feel like maybe they're too easily manipulated when they repeat
Oh,
buzzwords.
oh yeah. Oh, it's Right, and the right does it too, and the left does it. Each
Yeah,
side
no, I'm
has their
saying
own
even
buzz.
the right. Yeah, like,
The right
so
and the left have their own buzzwords,
there's a bit
and
Vegano, and when I read his stuff on Ukraine, which was 100% correct, I
who was
was
that?
like,
You cut out for just a second.
oh, sorry. Bishop Vegano, Archbishop Vigano or Vegano. And when he was talking about, he did a 9-page thing on Ukraine and all this stuff. And I was like, he was 100% right. But because it kind of ticked all of my boxes, said everything I wanted him to say,
You're like,
even to like
"Mm."
political issues here, like that concerns me. That just worries me that they're getting everybody into the same corral for a reason. And where, builds a taller fence after that. I really don't know. I just
You
don't
know
know.
what
That
would be
worries
you
me.
know what would be fun? I
Tell me.
just thought of this while you're talking, because you're talking about your anti-woke priest, and Buck is orthodox. You know it would be fun. It would be fun to have a show, not a full-time thing,
Yeah,
but it
yeah.
would be fun to do a
Do an
show
episode, yeah.
with an orthodox guy like Buck, and I think he's a cateman still. I'm not sure he's
Oh,
like,
really?
yeah.
Russian. You're
It,
talking Russian Orthodox,
I
right?
think it's either Eastern or Russian Orthodox. I don't know what.
Because Catholic has an Eastern rite
Right.
that is very close to Eastern Orthodox,
Yeah.
but it's not
He's
quite
no,
exactly.
he's either Russian or Eastern
Yeah.
Orthodox, and
And I
like it's
wanted
very
to I thought I could switch. I thought it could still be considered Catholic, and then I have a listener who's a priest, and he was just like wrote me an email. I was like, "No."
no. I heard you talk about that on an episode. No, you can't do that.
Yeah, but
Um,
I would not be the person to talk about, like, because I'm
no,
such
but
a
it would be
cradle
fun to get.
Catholic, I don't
No,
even know the rules.
not a theological
Got it,
conversation
okay.
per se, but it would be fun to take. I have a atheist friend who would be a blast to have the atheist, and me as a reformed Calvinistic, allegedly Protestant evangelical, and a Roman Catholic and an Eastern or Russian
Yeah.
Orthodox person on to, and have everybody go, how can you all agree? Because we're right.
Yeah, talk about actual issues and
Yes,
see if our values inform the issues. That's a great idea.
that would be we'd get
You gotta
tens
set
and
that up. What would you call it?
we'd get tens and tens of viewers.
No, we would all because we would all reach out to our people. There's a Twitter feed called Atheists Against Abortion. So, which I invented, and then my producer told me it already existed. I was like, why don't they just do that? Because there was, I don't know, it was like Catholics for abortion or something like that. I was like, why don't I have atheists against? It was like, it totally exists. So you could get like an atheist who didn't feel like he or she had to fit into that box of, because that's the problem. It's these baskets as silos. They want you take your label, and then you have
Right.
all these things you're supposed to agree with that really don't necessarily fit together. I mean, liberals crunchy granolas in California shouldn't have been the ones to lead the charge on mandating stuff for kids in private schools. Like, I mean, homeschoolers practically.
Yeah, but well, I won't go there. They're not anti-establishment because they're now the establishment.
Well, now they're the Nazis.
Right. Well, yeah, they're
They think they're
they're
anti-fascist, but
not.
they're
Yeah.
fascists. They're
They're
totally promoting a corporate governmental continuum of coercive profit-seeking behavior at the expense of individual health and life. I mean, it's got all the features. It's got the corporatism, it's got the eugenics, it's got it all. You
it's
know?
yeah, it's literal it's literal fascism, and it's, but they say it's not, because the only way that they can define fascism is by calling it a right-wing movement. And I'm like, every major fascist movement in the modern world has always been a socialist
Totally.
or Marxist movement.
Totally.
The only reason Italy imprisoned Antonio Gramsci was that Gramsci was a social Marxist instead of an economic Marxist. That was it. That was his.
Yes. Yeah,
That was
that's
their
probably
only
right.
reason,
Yeah.
is that he took a different view of Marxism than the.
Right. And that is actually at the base of this. It's not nationalism, it's non-whiteism, which I don't give a care about that. I don't have an identity thing. It's the thing that makes Trump irritate me more than anything else is that he brought identity politics to the right. Like, we were Teflon libertarians, everybody on the right was just absolute Teflon because we would not pivot to the cultural Marxist, wouldn't react to it, it was just, we were still talking in economic terms. It was very clear economic Marxism did not work. And they had been trying, I think, for 40 years to try to get the right to embrace identity politics. And it took Trump. And that's what I think is most tragic about it. And Obama, of course, could have cured it coming in. I'll have to look at that in a second. But so what Trump did. Anyway, well, I lost my train of thought because I read the comments. So we can talk about that.
I didn't mean to throw you off.
Yeah, that's okay.
You clearly have a few of your fan base are watching because you're people that I don't recognize.
I said what? Oh, here they are. I wasn't even looking at it. No, I said what I was meant to say, but yes, I have this thing called the contrary law of democracy that Chris is talking about. And the idea is you'll never get what you fear the most from the other party because you're keeping an eye on them. So you're not going to get, it came from a caller on my show said, Democrats aren't going to take your guns. That will take a Republican.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like war in Ukraine. The Republicans are never going to get that done. That will take a Democrat.
Well, Spike just said it on his show with Matt the other day. He said, Democrats promise you tyranny and give it to you. The Republicans promise you liberty and give you tyranny.
Yes, I've always said that. The difference between Democrats and Republicans is that Republicans lie.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, I have run afoul of this. Not only did I run afoul of my former employer, but now I'm running afoul of the conservative base in the state of Minnesota because I've, for the last couple of months, especially, I've been going after the GOP, the Minnesota GOP, because of the amount of corruption and just absolute one-upsmanship and gamesmanship that's been going on here. They're very much about this. Oh, we can only back the endorsed candidates. We got to get behind the endorsed candidates. And of course, it's whoever they've determined is going to be the endorsed candidate. But at the same time, they're literally campaigning against endorsed candidates within the Republican Party across the state of Minnesota if that endorsed candidate happens to be maybe more libertarian in their thought, or maybe not a centrist or a moderate. Because what Minnesota Republicans like to do is they like to tell you that they're watching out for you. And then they reach across the aisle to the left and cater to the leftist mentality here in the state of Minnesota. I don't know if we've ever seen that anywhere else here in the United States Republic where they've given us gun control laws recently. And I know maybe you've talked about that a little bit too.
I don't know, but I had a thought as you were talking about I've talked about this in a way, but the way you're putting it, it makes me think that like ideology has been truly weaponized in that by trying to get people to embrace an ideology, whether it's the leftist stuff, the rightist stuff, socialism, or I'm not going to say free market stuff because the MAGA thing is not free market stuff. They don't talk about that at all. It's pro-business, I guess you would say. And instead of like, I'm open to the idea. I'm open to the compromise of actual governments. I mean, I'm an anarchist because I just don't think it's possible. But like, I look back and it's funny because there were just a few things. So when I read Democracy, the God That Failed by Hans Hermann Hoppe, in that like right out of the gate, he said two things that I had like already concluded myself, which is when I really like love somebody when they say stuff that I'm like, yes, I'm not crazy. And the two things were,
you're still crazy. You just had somebody confirm.
Right. I have buddies in the bin, in the loony bin. So it was that the turning point, and these go hand in hand, that the real turning point, the real point of no return was World War I, and that if you were going to have a form of actual state government, the best one you could hope for really would be monarchy. And of course, World War I was there to destroy the monarchies. Why? Because they wanted to, the Illuminati or whatever, since the French Revolution basically wanted to make sure that there was no papa, like there was no caretaker who really had aligned interests with the people and weren't really able to fully exploit them, if only to save the neck of his own son. Like there was a definite alignment of interest. So if you go back to that, so these kind of ideologies, these ideologies without a sense of like family, a sense of responsibility towards each other in a government, like even Sweden, they don't have a monarchy. Well, I guess they actually do have a monarchy.
Yeah, I
but
think they still have
they
the
do,
king and
yeah.
queen of Sweden. Yeah,
But that they like they don't even have maybe it's changing now, but they didn't even have different parties. Like they just it was all about who's going to administer this system that we all agree on, because we're totally a homogeneous society. We're willing to basically share. We're not very ambitious. And I mean, because I have a very good friend who's Swedish, and that's how she represents it. Maybe other Swedish people will disagree, but that's my impression of them.
that's what the Swedes have become, because all of the hardworking Swedes
Oh yeah,
immigrated to North
that's probably
America.
true. Yes, that's an excellent point, and that is what they did. But the fact is that if you, and that's okay too in a way. It's not right to chase people away, but I feel like that immigration to the United States before there were any kind of rules going in and out, because if you have the rules going in and out, people can get trapped here and not want to go back for fear of not being able to return, and then you have the welfare state and all that. But before that, if you were not jiving with your culture, and what you really wanted was just to work like a dog and sink or swim, come to America, that was a great way to make sure that we had the culture that that was could work together. Like one of my great grandparents went back to Syria because he couldn't handle it. He left my grandmother in an orphanage and went back to Syria because he couldn't sink or swim, and he knew she could, because it was going to be her culture, and he left her. But I'm just saying that, like, when I'm not totally opposed to the idea of a government if there was any way to ensure that they were actually trying to govern in the interest of the people. And I think it's possible that that did exist in the past, although I was a little blind to that, I think. But now I feel like ideology itself is preventing that from happening, because what people want to do is serve the ideology, pay rhetoric to the ideology, and throw money at the rhetoric and at the politics, but never look at, does that ideology actually result in any kind of benefit to the people that's other than hyper theoretical?
Yeah.
Like you're talking about Gramsci, that kind of stuff is about what cultural hegemony, or I forget what it is, but I know it's a long march through the institutions, but it's about this theoretical organizing of society that's supposed to be somehow superior. And what does that even mean? Like, does he expect human beings to be different? Was there no time in human history that a society was healthy? Is that his idea, and that he's theorized one that would absolutely be healthy, is worth killing people for? It's just the ideology, to serve the ideology seems to not serve the people, and it seems like a never-ending battle to serve the ideology, and you never have to prove whether the ideology will work or not, because no one's ever fully implemented it.
Well, what if I posited this to you, Monica, and said that I don't think that the average Democrat, who is you just can't stay in the Democrat Party anymore and not be a leftist. There's just
Right.
there's no
right.
like, even those who say, well, I've always voted Democrat and I'm going to continue to vote Democrat, at that point you're just kind of tacitly acquiescing to the idea that you're going along for the leftist ride. But the leftist and the Democrat Party push against what they see as a right-wing ideology that they view as dangerous. The supposed centrist or even rightist in the Republican Party, the rhinos, the Republicans in name only, they're really no different than the leftist and the Democrat Party, in that they both are willing to use the power of the state to accomplish what they want, which is an advancement of their ideology through the threat of force. And And you
And
get people,
they will pay off the people with socialism. Both sides pay the people off with
yeah,
socialism.
absolutely. Uh, Republicans tend to use crony capitalism, which is just corporate socialism, to conduct their agenda in a way that's appealing to people who call themselves, decentralized small government people, and they're all for corporatocracy. Where the left hates corporations unless those corporations are woke, and then they're very much okay with those corporations dictating what you can and
I
cannot think and
know,
say.
right? That's such a
So
good point.
and so they're really no different. They both want the power of the state to execute their means to an end. And even people like me, who's more of a paleocon, with a lot of very strong not a lot, but completely constitutional originalist views, as well as very strong libertarian perspectives. People like me sound like these absolute radicals. People like you sound like these absolute radicals because you're not saying all of the stuff that's approved. And I've alluded to this before, like with my former career. I spent almost 13 years working within the law enforcement community on the detention end as a constitutionalist who took my oath very seriously with other people who claimed to be constitutionally minded. But the minute that it came down to, okay, now it's time to put your money where your mouth is and speak out, it was because I'm more interested in my place of comfort as long as I can say the right things in private.
Yeah, I actually have a lot of sympathy for people who are the breadwinners, like men, soldiers, stuff like that, who have little kids. I mean, uh, the stress that a person can be under when they have to feed their family, have like a given mortgage and all of that is
Well,
just
heck yeah.
unbearable. And I completely understand why you absolutely can't take any chance. It's totally coercive. It's absolutely awful that they do it. It's sinister, it's evil. It's the worst thing you can do. What really, and I understand it and it infuriates me, but why, thank you. Got a refreshment.
Oh,
Thank you.
is this competing merch placement?
Oh yeah, I didn't even mean to. That I did
No,
not
I
even
love it.
request. Did not request
That's
my
your
awesome.
new mug.
And I love it because it is so cheerful. It is blue like water. It's in the more I love this mug. I absolutely adore it. But anyway, you could go to monicasdeepdives.com. And I think under the support button, I'm redoing it. You could go to find the shop button. There's a lot of clicking to get to it, but you could do it if you were determined. Go to monicasdeepdives.com and go to the support
And
button.
you should. Everybody should
You
go to
could
Monica's
find it.
Deep
It's a
Dives.
really lovely
Yes.
way to start the day.
Or
So
you could just buy mine too.
of course, as expected, I got completely thrown off. But so a guy, I can understand that, and it's awful to do that to people. But what really, really upset me the most, maybe it's because I was like the LA thing or whatever, but that kids in high school are like that. And
Mm-hmm.
they have nothing to lose except for relationships with people who can't think for themselves. Like there's nothing to lose. And I remember how socially terrifying high school was. I hated it. I was not successful. I can't when my son was born with Down syndrome, the only thing I could think of and the only thought I had that wasn't horrible devastation was at least this kid won't have to go to high school. And of course, they changed everything and he had to go to high school. But anyway, just hated high school. And so I sympathize with the kids, but through the screens, they were just absolutely brainwashed, terrified, worse than men with families, worse than that.
Yeah. Well, because they'll ostracize you. They make it very clear that like the social pressure, which of course we spent years battling the idea of peer pressure. Like you and I came up in that idea of resist peer pressure, and now
because of drugs or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
But whatever it might be, whether it be, promiscuous sex or drug use or
No, but like the
drinking or,
drugs were why, like Nancy Reagan told us to
Oh,
resist
yeah.
peer pressure because of the drugs. Nobody was telling us to resist sex, right? Maybe in your world.
Well, it's like, I think you grew up in a more liberated New York area.
Ah, yes,
Yeah.
that's absolutely true.
I grew up in the Midwest, so
So I
we
had
still
one
had
thing.
values.
I had I did not. We did not. I was reading. I'm doing the series with podcaster I like, the Mad Vixen. She
Is this your Jordan Peterson series?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And the Jordan Peterson thing. So he had such an interesting point he made that I stumbled upon in that 12 Rules book. He said, the two things that we fear the most are death and social embarrassment.
Right.
And I was like, that's so true. Like, that's so true. And it made me feel better because I hate that stuff. That's probably why I was sick every time I did a show, is that I just hate it. I'm not like that anymore, but it's because, in answer to something you said earlier, because all what we're doing, which unfortunately does only reach people who are ready to be reached, is that what we're doing right now is a pull. Like people will pull us into their homes. They'll pull us onto their iTunes apps or YouTube or whatever. When I was on the radio, I was being pushed into the car. People were listening for traffic.
Mhm.
They were listening for news. They were listening for Rush. And every once in a while, they were getting me. I was pushed into their cars,
Yeah.
and they would complain and say, "This is my radio station. What are you doing on it?" And I'd be like, mainly, actually, the only complaints were that I was a Yankee. It's like, you are lucky to have this Yankee. I'm the only one who reads the Constitution on the air. Lunatic.
Yeah, it's funny how yeah. What is this person doing talking about this Constitution garbage on my radio
I
while I'm
know.
trying to listen to
Well,
a conservative?
It was okay when Obama was president, but when Trump was president, then they wanted me to pipe down on that.
Well, you were talking about how there's coercion that keeps people in line, really, and how you feel bad for especially men who are breadwinners. And that made me think about something I've been saying for quite some time, but really has kind of gotten me in a lot of trouble here recently. Is I tell people that Lincoln didn't free a single slave. He created an entire society of slaves. So instead of freeing the black man, he just enslaved all Americans.
There's a book by that name by Jeffrey Himmel, I think.
I did not know that.
Oh yes,
So.
and free. I think it's like freeing slaves, enslaving free men, but it's straight off of like the Mises website, if I recall correctly. But yeah, keep continuing, I will find it.
That's the thing that I tell people is like the preservation of the republic did not preserve the republic. It literally preserved slavery in the United States. Black man didn't get freed. Go ahead.
Let me tell you, it's Jeffrey Rogers Hummel. And it says, and I have this book actually, Emancipating Slaves, Enslaving Free Men, A History of the American Civil War. It's a good book, very quick read, and it is absolutely replete with references, a great bibliography, lots of footnotes. Jeffrey Rogers Hummel.
I'll have to have you tweet that to me or message it to me so I can.
Will do.
Try and add it to the show notes, or in the description of this video. Oh, and by the way, for those of you that are tuning in for the first time who are fans of Monica, I would really appreciate subscriptions to my channel because they are pushing me down in the algorithm like nobody's business. I hit 1,000 subscribers, got monetized, and my channel jumped like up to over $2,000 in like a month, and then they started pushing me down.
Yeah, that happens.
And so I would love the subscriptions.
We'll take this opportunity to tell people the specifics of how they can get in touch with you or follow you. But I also wanted to hear your backstory.
Yeah, we keep talking about that. So, and we hint at it. So for one, I am on Twitter at Robe Regiment, or you can just look at Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, the not the abbreviated. I'm also on Facebook, TC Pearson on Facebook. As far as my backstory, I've always, and this will probably not come as a surprise to anybody who's watched me enough. Even in high school, I was outspoken. I was not really all that concerned with popularity. I said things that people even back then didn't care to hear. And I've kind of carried that with me and joined the Army, got out of the Army, went into the retail world, and ended up getting laid off in the retail world during the first housing crisis, as it on the cusp of not Biden, Obama getting elected. And my brother, who's been in law enforcement for over 20 years, said, "Hey, the sheriff's office is hiring up here in Olmsted County, which now is the third largest metro area in the state of Minnesota. It's Rochester, which is where the Mayo Clinic is and where IBM was headquartered out of." And I said, "It's not really, I didn't go to college for that." And he says, "Well, they hire any schmuck." And they certainly did. And so I went to work as a sheriff's deputy, sworn deputy inside of a detention center. And having been in the military and having, um, did you mute yourself? Okay. You must have been like, that's part of the fun of my show is people
Slurping?
slurping. Yeah. It's like it's
Oh my
part of what we
gosh.
do. It doesn't
Well,
bother
I'm
me at
happy
all.
to slurp for you, but actually, there isn't
That
that isn't that
probably
a
fills
thing?
some
Doesn't
sort of fetish for
yeah?
someone
Doesn't
somewhere. Like,
AOC do that on purpose? Eats popcorn with her mouth open.
oh,
It's
well,
just so darn
j-
hot, and it's so delicious that I have to keep drinking it, even though it's
yeah.
ill advised.
I took my oath to the Republic, to the Constitution very seriously, having been in the military. And so when I took the oath for being a deputy, I took that very seriously. And I said, I'm never going to do anything that's going to cause me to violate my oath.
What was the oath?
The
Just
boy,
Constitution?
the oath to the to protect and defend the
General,
Constitution of the
right.
United States and the state of Minnesota. When you, as a deputy, you take that oath to defend the Constitution of the U.S. and of the state of Minnesota.
Nice.
And the state of Minnesota's Constitution is pretty much a reflection of the Constitution of the Republic. And I said, I take these things very seriously. And so if I'm ever put in a position where I have to choose between following an order or keeping my oath, I'm going to always keep my oath. And so I would have these conversations with, fellow deputies throughout, especially when we were working night shifts and, there wasn't a lot going on and we had a lot more time to just sit around and talk. I'd talk about this stuff with people because it's like a family. You spend 12 hours a shift with these folks for 84 hours a pay period. Sooner or later, you're going to talk about like everything. And so I was planning these ideas, just planning these ideas. And so when March of 2020 came around, like I said, I started warning people about all this stuff. And April 25th of 2020, I launched the channel because I decided I was going to go out and do man on the street interviews at conservative rallies calling for the end of the shutdown and the lockdowns in Minnesota. It was a big deal here in Minnesota. We were protesting at the state capitol. We were protesting at the governor's mansion, and I was going out to capture interviews. And then the George Floyd incident happened. And he was the right man at the right time for the agenda. And the riots started, and Rochester became targeted by those riots. And true to form, like even the poor folk in Rochester just couldn't get up the energy to really do a lot of damage in Rochester because they're still all a bunch of spoiled pansies. And I'm glad for that. But the mayor of Rochester, Kim Norton, who's still mayor, stood on the steps of the government center in front of the law enforcement doors and said, it's time that minorities in Olmsted County and in Rochester finally felt safe in the hands of law enforcement again. Now, I want to keep in mind that Rochester is predominantly a white community. They haven't had a law enforcement involved shooting at that point, they hadn't had one in a very long time. And the last one that there was something that involved a shooting of a minority or a shooting of a suspect, it was literally a white cop shooting a white deputy shooting a white guy who was a wanted bank robber who attacked him with a knife in the woods in the dark.
Wow.
So it's not like there was a massive amount of minority targeting happening in the Rochester area. So I watched these comments live as I was working in the master control post where my sergeant put me that night, because he said I need somebody with a calm head and experience who can keep an eye on the outside of the facility and keep an eye on the units inside of the facility, so that if something kicks off, I know I can trust that you're going to be able to handle it. And so I'm watching the mayor say these things live. And the next morning I get up, or I get done with work. I'm on my way home, and I call out the mayor by name and say, you need to choose your words carefully. What you did was very, very much incendiary. I got talked to that night by
Hold
the
on.
chief.
Who did you call the mayor out to? The mayor?
On my Facebook page.
Oh, okay.
On my Facebook page,
Got
I
it.
call the mayor out by name for what she said, and said, elected servants, because I don't call
Yeah.
them officials, elected servants, you need to choose your
Nice.
words carefully, because the things you say can stir up violence. And so I called the mayor out by name that morning of May 30th. And that night I got to work, got up to my post, and the chief deputy comes wandering around and starts to make small talk with me in the master control post. And I finally looked and I said, hey, look, Brian, you and I don't make small talk. What's going on? He goes, well, I need to talk to you about your social media.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, okay, stop. Did I violate policy? Nope. Did I say anything that identified me as an employee of the sheriff's office?
Oh.
Nope. I said, then why are we having this conversation? Well, people can figure out who you are and where you work. I said, that doesn't matter. I haven't violated any policy or any procedure. I haven't ever identified as a representative of the sheriff's office. I was very cautious in my content to do that. And he says, well, you just need to be careful. So I was pretty upset, and I took about 4 or 5 days, penned wrote an email, read it, reread it, read it, and reread it, sent it on the morning of July 5th or June 5th, asking for clarification about what it meant, that I needed to be careful. And I detailed the entire conversation in that email, like verbatim. Sent it to him. It took him 2 weeks to respond.
Yeah. I'm
He
sure
said,
he
well,
sent
when
it
you
to the
come,
lawyers and stuff.
so when you come back to days, we'll get together and have this conversation. And I said, I would much rather we be able to do this. I don't want to wait. Never did hear from him. Never did get called into his office. So I just continued going about doing what I was doing. And I started to interview business owners who were refusing to lock down their businesses, small business owners across the state of Minnesota. One of them happens to be about an hour away from me. And we developed a pretty good friendship, and she was being persecuted by a left-wing city attorney in a tiny little town called Albert Lea. It's about 18,000 people. And this city attorney was going after her like crazy. And she was representing her, my friend was representing herself. She was pro se and sui juris. And she was representing herself. So her legal counsel said, hey, you've got to get your rebuttal to these charges in to this city attorney by, the end of the business day tomorrow. And this happened in January of 2021. She went in to go deliver this. Now, remember, everything's shut down. It's by appointment only. She was calling, trying to schedule an appointment to come drop off this rebuttal. Long story short, she goes in, she follows all the policy and procedures. She signs in, she's wearing a face shield, or her son comes along to record, because at this point, ladies and gentlemen, if you're interacting with anybody in public, especially a public servant, you need to be recording everything for your own protection, because they will lie about you in a heartbeat. They ended up treating her like garbage and maliciously used a panic alarm to have her removed, summoning a law enforcement response from around this little city that resulted in like 6 or 7 police officers from the city showing up. And it happened to violate Minnesota state statute, which says you cannot use a 911 call or any kind of emergency panic system when you know that there is no danger to person or property. And I got my hands on this video that her son shot of her in this situation. And I pointed out that this woman, this city attorney, broke the law and no one did anything about it. And I started to call her out for that. And that started the ball rolling. She did not like, the city attorney and the chief of police did not like my content. And because I had called the chief of police and left him a voicemail and said, hey, I'm working as an independent journalist. I'd like to get your your comment on a bunch of things, and one of them is using a confidential, reliable informant to enter into a peaceful protest to gather video surveillance and pictures of a peaceful protest that was then used to charge Lisa Hansen with crimes at a peaceful protest. And if you don't know what a confidential, reliable informant is, they are normally a criminal who's
Right.
being offered some sort of plea deal or an exoneration of their charges to cooperate with the state. I left him that voicemail and said, I'd like to give you the opportunity to either retract the use of the CR, the confidential, reliable informant, or to explain why you felt that was okay, because I see it as a violation of the Constitution. I said, I'm releasing the story regardless, but I'd like to give you an opportunity to comment. He never called back, never gave any information. The city attorney and the chief of police used their power to figure out where I worked, reported me to the
Wow.
Minnesota Criminal Bureau,
Wow.
the Criminal Bureau, or Minnesota
Oh.
Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, and the FBI,
Wow.
saying that I was endangering them because I was calling for people to email and make phone calls to the city and to file formal complaints. And then they filed formal complaints with the sheriff's office. I was placed under internal investigation for over 60 days. They hired an outside private attorney, which is anywhere from $200 to $250 an hour, to investigate me for 60 days, ran me through the ringer, and then kept me on duty during the internal investigation. And then after the internal investigation was completed, took this document, this 45-page summary, which
Wow.
isn't even the totality of the investigation, that's just full of just literal. Yeah, go ahead.
When I think about if you've ever had a car stolen or your house broken into, they're like, yeah, you're never getting it back. We're not even going to try.
Right. But they can invest.
Right.
Oh, that's the thing. I'm like, here, the sheriff's office of Olmsted County, under the current sheriff, Kevin Torgerson, spent thousands of dollars investigating a good deputy who up until that point, the most recent annual review that I had was a stellar review by my sergeant, like just a couple of points out of a
Right.
perfect score, and I wasn't the best deputy ever.
And I mean, were you the
But-
only person expressing anything on social media? Like, it's your culture, like you were saying, it's not New York. It's not like you're living in LA. How
Well,
far afield could you have been?
more than likely, I probably was the only one that was saying anything. But the thing is I went to great lengths to not attach myself to the sheriff's
Right.
office.
Right. They need to have different rules, stated, and they probably can't, because at that point, then it really does start violating your rights. And
They
probably, like, why
absolutely.
would you not allow someone to speak? What are you up to?
Their policy and procedure is an absolute infringement upon public sector employees. Like, they literally tell you that your social media will be watched and will be used against you. Well, that's been ruled against time and time and time again, even before social media, that if you work in the public sector, you still have all of your rights. They don't get to terminate you for not supporting the right candidate or speaking out.
Have you considered pursuing it legally?
Well, what ended up happening is they filed intent to terminate. They did try
Right.
to terminate me, and they kept me out from April 30th of 2021 until they started making me offers, because my union attorney said, you guys are going to get your asses handed to you.
Interesting.
And they're like, well, if we're going to get our asses handed to us by the court, then it should be a 9-0 decision in the Supreme Court. And he goes, it's probably not going to be that, but it's definitely going to be a majority decision on the part of my client.
Yeah.
And unbeknownst to me, about 2 months before I even knew that they were making offers, the head of the Olmsted County HR, like the entire HR for the entire county, reached out to the union attorney, and said, what do we need to do to make this go away? Because
Wow, I'm surprised that the union attorney was there for you. Like, I've known some teachers who have numerous times, different states, everything, where the union is just not there for
law
you. It's so
enforcement
weird.
union is a lot different than
The teachers
than the teachers unions. The teachers unions tend to be a very deep reflection of the totality of the teachers. law enforcement unions tend to be a very deep reflection of the most of the law enforcement world, which tends to be pretty centrist or pretty conservative. And even though, and I developed a pretty good friendship with the union attorney who said, hey, look, I don't really agree with everything that you say, but I would defend to the death
Yeah. Good.
your right to say these things. And the thing is what you're saying is not really that crazy. And you haven't said anything dangerous. He goes, like, she literally tried, this attorney that I hired tried to make it sound like I was blackmailing the chief of police. And he's like, if anything, I would use he told her this, I would use your transcript of his phone call to the chief of police as a defense
Right.
for my client, because
Wow.
he's doing what a journalist should do, which is
Right.
give somebody an opportunity to talk before they run the story. And he
Right.
says, you're calling this blackmail.
Wow.
And yeah, she tried to paint me out. She goes,
Oh,
well,
that's
what?
awesome.
So when we had our meeting with the entire county, and I mean, the prosecutor's office for the county was there to represent the sheriff's office. They had 3 members of the HR department there, plus the chief deputy. And the head of HR said, well, we had proof that you were doing. I was like, you don't have that. Well, and I used Ayn Rand. I said, I reject your premise.
Right.
He goes, what do you mean you reject my premise? I said, I didn't do anything illegal, unlawful, or unethical. I said, I just didn't do what you wanted me to do, which was to keep my mouth shut.
Right.
And it was that day that, unbeknownst to me, he started to try and to pay me off.
Wow.
They wanted to pay me off. My attorney said, no, we're not going to take it. But I sat for months on
I find that I had
administrative leave at home.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, it was emotionally,
yes.
it was emotionally
I had
and
a
physically
dispute
damaging.
with an employer once, and I mean, I did not want to pursue it in any way, shape, or form, but I had a contract and they were not paying my contract. And they gave me a contract in a really hot market where I could have gotten a different job so that I wouldn't leave. And then when the market cooled off, they laid everybody off. And I was like, well, I would have a better contract and a better, you enticed me to stay, and now you're not going to pay your half. So I had to pursue it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like 18 months and it was awful. Like it's just emotionally awful. I hated
well, and I
anybody
couldn't apply for work. I couldn't go put an application in anywhere because they'd be like, well, you have a good job now. Why are you applying for a
Right.
job?
Right.
Well, I'm being disciplined. They're trying to
Right.
fire me. Well, because I'm the honest guy. I
Yeah.
don't want to lie to them because they're going
Right.
to check. They're like, well, this
And
guy
it
still
can
work for.
impair. So I
Yeah.
learned in business school, they said, if you're ever going to sue your employer for anything, sexual discrimination or any of that, anything at all, be sure that the risk return calculation will give you upfront the NPV of a lifetime of work, because you may never work again, because nobody wants to hire somebody who has the stomach for a lawsuit. And I mean, that is a problem.
And that's been, the so they ended up making an offer, and I told the attorney, I said, this is killing my family. I
Yeah.
said, if it was just me,
It's got to stop.
I said I could drag this on forever.
Yeah.
I got a lot. I love my house. It's over 100 years old. I can do all sorts of landscaping to make it look like it's supposed to look. I can keep doing that. But this is killing the family, and not
So
knowing is really
stressful.
hard.
Yeah.
And they ended up making, and I said, if they're going to make an offer, you tell them I'm not making an offer. I'm not asking them for anything. If they
Right.
want this to go away in the sense of not having it hang out there anymore, I said, then they need to make an offer, and they better not insult me. And the first thing that they did is they went to the sheriff, and the sheriff was like, well, I'll give him 3 weeks pay.
What?
And they didn't want to pay out my PTO. My understanding is they didn't want to pay out. I could be wrong. I'm not saying this is a fact.
Right.
It was 3 weeks of pay for a deputy who had no massive major discipline issues. 3 weeks
Wow.
of pay. They didn't want to pay out my PTO or something like that. And he told the attorney, says, you guys could take your offer and shove it, because I guarantee you right now, then we'll see you in court. We'll take this all the way. And they ended up making an offer that finally he says, it's not what you want, but it should give you some cushion. And it put me in a position where I could start to look. But I'm telling you, Monica, I'm like, I've taken the hit. I'm not making a quarter of what I was making.
Wow.
And so when I try and sell merchandise and stuff,
It's for a
I'm literally,
reason.
I have a Patreon page that I'm not running, or not a
Right.
Patreon. I have a Subscribe Star that I down there if anybody's interested. I have a Subscribe Star, but I try not to. I don't like just, hey, everybody give me money. Now, if anybody wants to super chat, I'll take all the super chats they want. But I don't just go around asking for money. I want to offer something in return
Yes,
because that's who
definitely.
I am. I don't want to just like, oh, hey, give me $20 and a month for for nothing. Like, buy some coffee from me because it's helping
Yes.
me. It's helping the vet and his family that blends and makes the coffee for me. The merchandise helps somebody. So that's the thing is I'm not like trying to beg people for stuff just to get things.
Where can people get your coffee?
They can order it from me through either email tcpearson@protonmail.com, or they can message me on Facebook, or they can message me on Twitter. Like if you like coffee, this seriously, I've got people that canceled their subscription to Black Rifle, which is of course is supposed to be the conservative coffee company. And it's in keeping with the theme of the Black Robe Regiment. I named it after one of the Black Robe Regiment pastors, Muhlenberg.
Nice.
So that's the first roast. We're working on some others.
So what's your plan? I mean, what are you going to do? Did you get another job, or what's the story?
I am working again, and but it's warehouse work. After listening to you on History Homos the other day, aren't we? We're not supposed to talk about that. It's impolite to talk about where people work. Right?
Oh yes, sorry. No, I wasn't asking specifically what you
I know.
were
I'm
doing.
teasing.
I just wondered if you were if you had some
teasing.
income, because that really is devastating.
Yeah,
devastating.
but it's
and the stress. I mean, the heart stress of that is just...
it's every day is I'm not gonna lie, every day is a struggle. I mean, it's literally a struggle. Like, I use Subscribe Star to keep the internet on so I can continue to put out content, basically. Because I do have some subscribers on there, and I'm very thankful. And I have a group, Arden Sales Group out of the Twin Cities, that has become kind of a monthly supporter. We don't really run ads for them, but they're very much in the mindset of expose the corruption, and so they've gifted me some stuff. And I have a kind of another Patreon, if you will, who's bought me a new camera and bought me a new computer system and stuff, which is I'm all very, very, very thankful for. But it's still very, it's hard to go from a career where you were making good money and were damn good at your job to now all of a sudden literally a quarter of what I was making a year. A quarter.
Yeah, that's
in this economy.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna
and it's not right that bad actors who are in a public position where they're supposed to be public servants, and they have that kind of power. And that's what I said about Obamacare. The only activism I ever did as an adult was anytime there was an anti-Obamacare march in DC, I went, because I said, this is the tipping point when the entire economy, when more than 50% of the entire economy is government, you can never have a small government movement again. When tax cutting is suggested, more than half the people are going to see that as a threat to their income. You cannot have the government control everything, because then you can never vote with your feet. You always have to beg. You always have to protest. You're always at their mercy. There's no autonomy and therefore no integrity. And it's just a terrible situation. It's terrible. Same thing with
Obama's second term was the first time in the history of the United States that 51% of the electorate were on some form of federal payout.
Wow. Yeah. No, I knew it was like that was
51%, which is a very small majority, but it's a majority.
It doesn't matter. That's how you get European style politics, where everything's about the protest because everybody's plugged into the government. Conservatism is just about more efficient government.
De Tocqueville said, when the American populace realizes that they can vote for themselves from the largesse of the and I'm paraphrasing, the war chest of the republic will be lost. And there again, I'm paraphrasing, but that's what his point was. He was like, once they realize that they can vote that kind of income for themselves, it's done. And ladies and gentlemen, we are on the cusp of it, which is why I wanted to have Monica on, and we're coming up on her heart out. So that's why I wanted to have you on, because you're out here, you're saying these things that are I'm like, you're like a Scott Horton level, like not afraid to say the truth of the things that are going on. And so when I use Scott Horton, I mean it as a compliment, by the
Yeah,
way.
no, of course. I don't I don't have a I don't work for the government though. So I'm not at the kind of risk. I worry if I didn't, and I came out under my own name, which thankfully is so common that I've like often been detained at the airport because they think I'm a drug dealer. So there's plenty
Well,
of
you
Monica
are for
Perez's
the
out there.
libertarian movement. You deal the drug of truth. So.
And that actually, maybe they detain me for that reason. I don't know. But yeah, I'm kind of safe in that I'm like hidden in plain sight with my generic name. But but I do get nervous, and yeah, people suffer. I mean, I always said when I got fired from my job at the radio, I was like, I always said, just don't kill me, just fire me. I will leave quietly, and I did. And I feel thankful that it's not as bad. We haven't gone full Argentina yet, but it is still a lot of suffering. I mean, people die of heart attacks all the time, and men die of suicide from it too.
Oh, it's yeah. I mean, yeah. I'd be lying if there haven't been some incredibly dark days in September of last year when I realized, like, okay, my life is completely changed. And it has. My wife was fortunate enough to be able to stay home and home educate our kids from start to finish for over
Fantastic.
20 years.
Wow, that's so
And
great.
she is now in a position where she's working with my daughter. My daughter is the historical society director in our little town, and they work together at the museum. And then she does some works at an upscale bakery here in our town. But it's still that's a very, very much a culture shock for us. So, Monica, tell everybody where they can find you, and we'll boot you. And then after I boot you, I'll say all sorts of
Okay.
inappropriate and impolite things about you
That's
as I close
totally
up.
fine. Yes, I am Monica Perez. You can reach me if you want to tweet at me. That's my favorite social media, at Monica Perez Show.
And she'll read you on her show if you're witty.
Yes. I have to get a little more refined about that. I do solicit tweets for my show, which is Deep Dives with Monica Perez, which you can find free on any of your favorite podcasting channels. And I'm beginning to populate my my website, which is under construction, but that's going to be monicasdeepdives.com.
Well, Monica, I appreciate your time, and I know you got a hard out. We're 2 minutes past it, so
It's okay.
you get out of here, and we'll put together this weird roundtable of the atheist, the Orthodox, and the Roman Catholic. I think it'd be fun to.
I'll think of a great name for it. And I do thank you. I was really looking forward to hearing your story and connecting with you. And thank you very much for having me on.
Well, thanks for promoting this ahead of time. Have a good one. All right, ladies and gentlemen, head over to Monica's platforms and find her. She is phenomenal. And she says some things that a lot of you aren't going to like. I'm not going to lie. If you are a conservative Republican type in Minnesota or here in the United States and you watch my stuff, there are going to be some things like I say that you don't like that Monica is going to say that you are not going to like at all. You're not, just like you wouldn't like a lot of what Scott Horton says, but I want you to watch that. This is where we need to be. We need to be exposed to these ideas and these ideals that make us uncomfortable. We have to, whether it be a left-wing idea or a libertarian or a right-of-center idea. We need to be exposed to things that make us uncomfortable, that we don't like to hear. Because if all we're ever doing is listening to those things that make us comfortable and make us happy, then we're living in an echo chamber and we're not going to fix anything. I had a friend who's been reaching out to me over the last couple of days through social media. She's saying, like, what are we going to do to get the politicians to pay attention? And I told her, I says, the focus is not the politicians. Your focus shouldn't be on the politicians. Your focus needs to be on waking up your neighbors, your friends, and your family. Period. That's who you need to wake up. That's who you need to be having these conversations with. The politicians are a lost cause. The ones that are in office right now, for the most part, not all of them, but many of them. We need to be having these hard, uncomfortable conversations, saying the hard, uncomfortable things to the people that we love the most to get them to wake up. That's what matters. So for those of you that are first-time watchers, thank you for watching. If you've subscribed, Thank you for doing that. Please share this out. Monica said that we're going to run this as a buddy dive on her channel, on her platform as well. So once I figure out how to help her get that done, you'll be able to look for this content on her platform as well. I don't care if you're a libertarian. I don't care if you're a Mises Caucus libertarian or a Waffle House Caucus libertarian. I don't care if you're a conservative, Republican, a paleocon. I don't care if you're just a slightly left of center or centrist. We need to take our republic back. So I'm going to ask you, like I ask my regulars all the time, to fight for your liberty, fight for your freedoms. And until next time, Sic Semper Tyrannis.
We are go for liftoff in T-minus 30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.